Brothers and sisters, welcome to Talk of Africa 360. Tonight, the winds of history are blowing across the deserts of the Sahel, carrying with them a message so powerful that it has shaken the very foundations of Western capitals. In Paris, silence; in Washington, panic; in Brussels, confusion. For today, a nation they once dismissed as small has struck a thunderbolt that the world did not see coming. Burkina Faso, yes, the landlocked country the West mocked as poor and weak, has just signed an 80 billion partnership with Saudi Arabia, and the aftershocks are rippling across the globe. Can you feel it? This is not just business. This is revolution dressed in the language of economics. For too long, the West has told Africa what it can and cannot do. They said we must borrow, we must beg, we must remain dependent. But in one single deal, Captain Ibrahim has shattered that lie, proving that Africa can rise, Africa can negotiate, Africa can choose its own destiny. Think about the scale: $80 billion. That is not aid, not loans with chains attached, not crumbs from the IMF's table. No, this is investment on African terms, forged in partnership with a new ally who sees value where the West only saw weakness. Hospitals will rise, industries will expand, energy will flow, and Burkina Faso will become a beacon of African sovereignty in a world where dignity has too often been stolen from us. But make no mistake, the West is furious. You can almost hear the panic in the boardrooms of multinational corporations, the whispers in foreign ministries, the shouts behind closed doors at the EU and the G7. They know what this means. If Burkina Faso can do it, so can Mali. If Mali can do it, so can Niger. If Niger can do it, so can Congo, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and suddenly, the old system of exploitation crumbles like sand in their hands. This is why tonight's story is not about Burkina Faso alone. It is about Africa itself. It is about our power to choose, our power to unite, our power to tell the world, we are not your backyard, we are not your experiment, we are not your colonies anymore. We are sovereign, we are awake, and we are ready to write the next chapter of human history with our own hands. So stay with me, because what I will share tonight is more than news, it is prophecy in motion. The West is trembling, Africa is rising, and history is unfolding before our very eyes. Brothers and sisters across the African continent and beyond, today we bring to you breaking news that has not only shaken the foundations of Western capitals but has also redrawn the global economic map. This is Talk of Africa 360, and what we are about to reveal is nothing short of historic. Burkina Faso, the heart of West Africa, has just sealed an astonishing $80 billion partnership with Saudi Arabia. Yes, you heard it right, $80 billion. A deal so massive, so strategic, and so unexpected that it has left Europe and the United States scrambling for answers, stunned at how Africa is reshaping its destiny in front of their very eyes. What does this partnership mean? It means energy independence, industrial expansion, financial security, and above all, sovereignty for a nation long underestimated. Burkina Faso, a country the West once dismissed as poor, landlocked, and dependent, is now sitting at the negotiating table with one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Together, they have designed a vision that merges African resilience with Gulf oil power, African land with Saudi finance, and African innovation with Middle Eastern technological investment. The West is in shock because for decades they believed Africa had no choice but to depend on them to bend to their loans, their aid packages, and their exploitative contracts. They never imagined that a small nation like Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim, would flip the script and announce a collaboration of this magnitude. Imagine the sheer scale: an $80 billion blueprint covering infrastructure, energy plants, healthcare, agriculture, mining, defense, and even advanced digital technology. This isn't just another deal. This is the cornerstone of a new world order, one where Africa is no longer the begging hand but the commanding voice. In Riyadh, the signing ceremony was unlike anything seen before. The Saudi ministers, flanked by their financial and energy moguls, sat shoulder to shoulder with representatives, not in a patronizing posture, but in full respect. Both sides spoke of equality, of mutual respect, of partnership instead of exploitation. This alone marked a revolution in how international deals are crafted. It was not the language of debt traps, not the language of aid dependency, but the language of cooperation, investment, and growth. Western analysts, still reeling, are calling it a geopolitical earthquake. Washington whispers of a dangerous precedent. Brussels mutters about economic risks to Europe's access to African resources. But in Ouagadougou, the air is thick with celebration, chants of independence, and dreams of prosperity. Ordinary citizens know exactly what this deal represents: the end of begging for aid, the end of hand-me-down donations, and the dawn of an era where Africa chooses its partners freely, guided by dignity, respect, and sovereignty. And let us not forget the symbolism. For decades, the narrative of Africa was controlled by the West. Today, that narrative has been ripped from their hands. No longer will Burkina Faso be forced to accept second-hand equipment, overpriced loans, or conditional aid. Instead, they are building highways, airports, hospitals, and industries with partners who see Africa not as a charity case but as a strategic equal. This is why the world is stunned. This is why headlines across Europe and America read with disbelief. How did Burkina Faso pull this off? They cannot fathom that African leadership, rooted in courage and self-belief, can challenge centuries of dominance. But the truth is, what happened today in that $80 billion signing is the fruit of a Pan-African awakening, a movement spreading from Dakar to Addis Ababa, from Bamako to Lusaka. Brothers and sisters, this is more than a deal. This is a revolution. And so, my brothers and sisters, as we bring this monumental story to a close tonight, let us pause and absorb the magnitude of what has just unfolded. Burkina Faso, once labeled small and weak, has stood tall before the world and announced an $80 billion partnership with Saudi Arabia, a deal that has shaken Washington, rattled Brussels, and silenced Paris. It is not simply about numbers on a contract. It is about rewriting Africa's destiny with courage and conviction. This deal is proof that Africa no longer needs to be trapped in the cycle of dependency, of begging, of waiting for crumbs to fall from Western tables. No, the tide has turned. The people of Burkina Faso have shown that when a nation believes in its own worth, when its leaders dare to dream beyond colonial boundaries, the impossible becomes reality. $80 billion is not just investment capital. It is a statement to the world that Africa is rising and will no longer be ignored. Tonight, let every African child know that our future is not one of poverty, but of possibility. Let every farmer know that his land is not just soil to be exploited by outsiders, but the foundation of global trade. Let every worker know that his sweat will no longer enrich foreign masters, but will build industries, factories, and skyscrapers in his own homeland. And let every leader across this continent know that true sovereignty is not granted, it is seized with vision, courage, and unity. The West is furious because they see the cracks in their centuries-old control. They see Africa choosing new partners, setting new rules, building new alliances that exclude exploitation. And what they fear most is not just the billions in lost profits, what they fear most is the example. If Burkina Faso can rise, so can Niger, so can Mali, so can Congo, so can every nation from Cape Town to Cairo. This is the chain reaction they dread, and it has already begun. Brothers and sisters, history will remember this moment. It will remember that on this day, Africa declared to the world, "We are not your subjects, we are not your colonies, we are not your dependents, we are equals, we are partners, we are sovereign nations with dignity, pride, and power." So let us celebrate, but let us also remain vigilant. For the struggle is not over. The same powers that once enslaved us, colonized us, and drained us will not give up easily. They will attempt sabotage, they will attempt propaganda, they will attempt division. But if we remain united, no force on this earth can stop the African Renaissance. And so, in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, in the spirit of resistance, in the spirit of independence, let us echo these words across the deserts, the savannas, the rainforests, and the cities of our beloved continent. Africa will never kneel again. This is not the end. This is the beginning. A new dawn is upon us. Burkina Faso has lit the torch, and now it is up to all of us to carry that fire forward. This has been Talk of Africa 360. The revolution is alive, and the world is watching. Brothers and sisters of Africa, patriots, dreamers, warriors of truth, open your ears, open your hearts, open your spirits, because what I am about to share with you tonight is not just another headline, not just another story whispered through the winds of change. No, tonight, Africa stands before a moment so thunderous, so earth-shaking, that the very foundations of the West tremble in disbelief. Tonight, the land of the upright men, Burkina Faso, has delivered a shockwave that has echoed through Washington, through Paris, through London, through Brussels, through every corridor of Western power. And the name of that shockwave is written in bold, unshakable letters, an $80 billion partnership with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Pause for a moment and breathe in that number, $80 billion. For decades, Africa has been told to accept crumbs, loans tied with chains, aid filled with conditions, promises soaked in betrayal. For decades, the so-called leaders of the world sat across from our representatives, signing deals worth a few $100 million here, $1 billion there, while they reaped hundreds of billions from our lands, our resources, our labor. For decades, Africa was told that it could not dream, that it could not command, that it could not demand its rightful share. But today, Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Ibrahim and his revolutionary allies across the Sahel, has dared to do what others thought impossible. They have signed a deal that does not beg but commands, a deal that does not humiliate but uplifts, a deal that does not surrender Africa's soul but restores it. $80 billion, and the West is furious. Now, why are they furious? Because this deal is not with them. This deal bypasses the World Bank, bypasses the IMF, bypasses the European Union, bypasses the same systems that for decades have trapped Africa in cycles of debt, dependency, and desperation. This deal is with Saudi Arabia, a nation that knows what it means to take control of its destiny, a nation that understands the power of resource wealth, a nation that has looked at Africa not as a beggar but as a partner. And in that partnership, Burkina Faso has found an ally that says, let us build, let us rise, let us invest in the future. Not with crumbs, but with billions. Not with chains, but with bridges. Let us ask ourselves, what does $80 billion mean for a country like Burkina Faso, a nation that has for so long been painted by Western media as poor, unstable, dependent? $80 billion is not just money. It is power. It is transformation. It is infrastructure that lights up every city and every village. It is factories that process our gold, our cotton, our cashews, our shea, instead of sending them raw to Europe and America. It is hospitals that no longer depend on second-hand equipment discarded by France or Germany, but state-of-the-art centers built with African hands, staffed by African doctors trained to the highest global standards. It is schools that do not crumble under the weight of neglect, but thrive with libraries, laboratories, and technologies that equip our children to lead in science, in innovation, in the digital future. $80 billion is the fuel of a revolution, and make no mistake, brothers and sisters, this partnership is not just about Burkina Faso. No, this is about Mali, about Niger, about Guinea, about all of Africa. Because when Burkina Faso signs such a deal, it sends a signal. Africa will no longer play small. Africa will no longer settle for less. Africa will no longer be dictated to by the West. Africa has choices. Africa has options. Africa has power. And that is why the West is furious. That is why the corridors of Brussels are filled with whispers. That is why Washington calls emergency meetings. That is why Paris tightens its jaw. Because the unthinkable has happened. Africa has dared to imagine itself outside of their grip. Now, let us be clear. This is not charity from Saudi Arabia. This is not pity. This is partnership. Saudi Arabia, for all its wealth, for all its oil, for all its ambitions, understands that the future of global power runs through Africa. And so, they have invested not to exploit, but to ally. They have invested not to strip Africa bare, but to build an Africa that stands on its own 2 feet, so that together, Africa and Saudi Arabia can reshape the balance of global power. For decades, the West had a monopoly. Monopoly over energy, monopoly over trade, monopoly over finance. But now, a new axis is emerging, an axis of the global South, an axis of nations that have been underestimated, undermined, overlooked. And in that axis, Africa is not a follower. Africa is a leader. Think of the irony, for centuries. Europe and America exploited Africa, growing rich on our labor, on our minerals, on our land. They told us we were too weak, too poor, too divided to stand alone. And yet today, it is their economies that quake at the thought of losing access to Africa's markets. It is their companies that tremble at the idea of African nations building their own industries, their own supply chains, their own financial independence. It is their farmers who fear losing contracts as Africa turns toward new partners. It is their banks who dread the day Africa no longer needs their loans. It is their governments who panic when they realize Africa is no longer begging for a seat at the table. Africa is building its own table. And this is why Burkina Faso's partnership with Saudi Arabia is more than just economics. It is political, it is psychological, it is spiritual. It tells every African child that we are not doomed to the margins. It tells every African leader that we are not trapped in dependency. It tells every African citizen that we can demand, we can negotiate, we can sign deals that respect our dignity. $80 billion is not just a number, it is a statement. Africa is not for sale. Africa is for partnership. Do you feel it? Do you hear the tremors under your feet? That is the sound of the old order collapsing. That is the sound of colonial illusions crumbling. That is the sound of Africa awakening. And it began in a place the West thought they had silenced. Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, the land of Sankara, the land where dignity is born, where revolution is raised, where courage is fed by the fire of history. How fitting, how poetic that it is here, once again, that Africa has chosen to defy the empire. Tonight, I want you to imagine what this deal will mean in practice. Imagine roads that stretch from Ouagadougou to Bamako, from Niamey to Conakry, highways that do not stop at colonial borders but connect Africa as one. Imagine energy grids powered not by imported fuel but by solar plants, wind farms, and hydroelectric dams financed by this partnership. Imagine a new African airline funded by this deal connecting every major city of the continent directly. So no African has to fly to Paris to reach their brother in Dakar, no African has to land in Brussels to see their sister in Nairobi. Imagine food security programs that ensure not a single African child goes to bed hungry. Imagine research institutes that develop vaccines in Africa for Africans, ending once and for all the humiliation of waiting for the West to rescue us. $80 billion makes this possible. And yet, while we dream, let us also be vigilant, because the West will not sit quietly. They will call this deal dangerous. They will call it reckless. They will say Burkina Faso has sold its soul to Saudi Arabia. They will attempt to divide us, to scare us, to bribe us, to overthrow us. They will unleash their media to smear, and his allies as dictators, as radicals, as threats to democracy. They will whisper to some of our leaders, promising them riches if only they betray this vision. They will even fund mercenaries, stir up conflicts, attempt assassinations. We know their playbook. We have seen it in Congo with Lumumba, in Ghana with Nkrumah, in Libya with Gaddafi. We know the lengths they will go to in order to crush African independence. But let them try. Because this time Africa is ready. This time Africa is united. This time we do not stand alone. We have allies, we have partnerships, we have resources, we have the fire of our ancestors burning in our hearts. Burkina Faso has lit the torch. Now it is up to us to keep it burning.